Hello and welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Verley, founder and CEO of Project Purple, and we have another interview for coming to you today with a very special guest. But first, I just wanted to give you a quick update. At the time of this recording, we are rolling through marathon season and our November awareness season as well. We've had runners either running or just have finished or getting ready for races in Berlin, London, Twin Cities, Chicago, New York City, and many other events across the country. We've also had gyms and group fitness teams hosting our push-pull events and all sorts of fundraisers. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who is helping to spread awareness, raise funds, and help us fight for a world without pancreatic cancer. If you'd like to see how you can get involved, visit projectpurple.org and make sure to follow us wherever you go to on social media. We're on everything, even TikTok now. So feel free to follow us on all social media channels. Without further ado, let's meet our guest today, coming to us all the way from Hamden, Connecticut, a local guy here, not that far. That's a pun here. Richard Connor, PC advocate, podcast host. Welcome to the Project Purple podcast.
Thank you so much, Dino. It's really a privilege and honor to be here.
Well, I know it's, we've connected, full disclosure, we connected a while back and we were kind of playing connect the dots. You and your family, I should say, have been active in the pancreatic cancer community here locally in Connecticut with PanCan, another great group. And we, here at this podcast, there's a couple rules. We can go anywhere and we don't hold back. There's so many great groups in this space, and that's something with pancreatic cancer. The more groups that are out there promoting, raising awareness, people doing positive things, as you and I were talking about before we hit record here, this is why we're here. We're here to share the positivity. This disease has left such a negative impact on so many people's lives today and in the past and in the future that, I hope our goal here with the podcast is to raise positivity, and regardless of what group you support or what you do, it doesn't matter. We're all in this world together to make a difference and to make a positive difference. So I know it's taken us a while to connect. I've had a busy schedule, and I'm excited to have you on because you turned to running and you got this great idea. You started a podcast, and we'd love to hear about it. So with that, I want to pass the mic over to you to kind of share your background and what brings you to us today. And as I said before we hit record, you can say as high level as you want. You can get as in depth as you want. And with that, the microphone is yours.
I appreciate that. And there's so much for me to say, so I have to figure out where to start and where to go. But I'll start on the professional side. Started off my career in more of technical fields. I have an engineering degree and always aspired to become an engineer. And very early on in my career, I moved to business and took on my first marketing role. Didn't know what I was getting into, but absolutely loved it. So, started off a great career in marketing, and fast forward 17 years later, it's still a passion of mine. So, I've done a number of things throughout my career across a couple of different companies. Previous to the company I'm with now, I was in the fire and life safety industry and was in all forms of marketing positions in terms of new product development, product commercialization, lifecycle management. So a lot of exciting work there. And then I switched over to the medical device industry, where I am now. I've been here for the last 6 years and kind of continued my marketing career, and just recently changed roles into a program leader role, managing more operations and new product development work. But again, marketing is still kind of near and dear to my heart. So that's a little bit about me on the professional side. And on the personal side, born and raised here in Connecticut. So we're still here, but my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad's from the Dominican Republic. My mom's from Jamaica. Somehow they made their way to the US and settled down in Connecticut. So I'm still trying to figure out the backstory behind that, but it's just been, a wonderful place to grow up and also raise a family. So I'm here with my wife, who's from Peru, and my 3 kids, and Hamden, Connecticut.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So, how did you get started with the podcast? Because I know, your podcast, I saw an email come across, I think, or a Google hit, and it mentioned, you were kind of getting into running, and I'd love to hear how you got started there.
Yeah. So it actually started with running. So I'll share that story first and how it kind of led to the podcast. I started running in high school and I started running cross country. I did that for 3 years, sophomore through senior year. I did track for a couple of years, and it was one of those sports that I really felt like I could get into. The other sports I wasn't very good at, and I really wanted to do something, find something that kind of keep me busy after school. So cross country was it. Had a good first year right out of the gate, and I just kind of stuck with it all the way through. And then after high school, I didn't really run through college and working full time and moving out on my own. I did just as part of my workout, but didn't really enjoy it as much and really didn't take it as seriously as I did in high school. Fast forward many years later, I went back to my old high school to run their annual 5K. And it was a little nostalgic kind of being back there and old memories and seeing former teachers. And it kind of got me back into running, but not to the extent that I wanted to. I would probably train a couple of weeks before the 5K and say, I'm a runner, I'm ready to go. But it wasn't until about 4 years ago, I learned about obstacle course racing. And obstacle course racing, I think a lot of folks know some of the big brands in obstacle course racing, like Tough Mudder and Spartan. But you're basically climbing over things, you're climbing under things, you're rolling through mud, you're avoiding barbed wire, you're jumping over fire. Like, it's a lot of cool stuff. But honestly, it was a lot of stuff that really just scared me. I'm afraid of heights. I don't have a lot of upper body strength. I'm a runner, so I didn't really need a lot of upper body strength. And I felt like this was a way for me to face my fears and kind of do things that I'd never done before. And I would say obstacle course running really kind of kickstarted my love for running again, because I wanted to be good at the running piece, but also kind of learn to do the things that I'd never been able to do in my life. And that's kind of what got me into it. So I started Spartan. I think I did my first Spartan race somewhere around 2018, 2019. And since then, I've done about 10 plus races, virtual and in person, muddy races, stadium races. And then this year, I just completed my first Spartan Trifecta, which is a sprint, super, and a beast. So it's a 5K, 10K, and half marathon distances with obstacles. And that was really one of my key goals early on, was to kind of keep challenging myself. And my coach says, okay, well, you did the first race, you did the second race. How about going all the way, go all the way to a trifecta? And here we are a few years later. So that's a little bit about my running journey, but I could share a little bit more about, how it led to the podcast.
So I got a quick question before we go there, though. Where did you do the trifecta? Because I know a little bit about Spartan. We dabbled with them years ago, pre-COVID, and those races are no joke. And I don't know. I know Tough Mudder was in the space, and I think Tough Mudder is kind of dissolved a bit. I think I don't know if they're still in or if they've been incorporated. I thought Spartan may have purchased them a bit.
Yep.
So and I've done a variety of these obstacle course races throughout the years, but Spartan has always been kind of, there was like levels of these obstacle course races, right? And I think Spartan was always at the very top. Tough Mudder was always trying to catch them, I guess. And then you had some other fringe ones or regional ones underneath them. But the Spartan ones typically are pretty intense, I guess is probably the best term to use in terms of, the obstacles, the courses. A lot of their courses are, in this part of the country are at various ski resorts, which you have elevation gain, you're talking 1,000 feet, from bottom to top. So when you did your Trifecta, did you do it up in Vermont or did you do it locally here in the tri-state area?
Yeah, so all of them were local. So I have to think about where I did each of the races as we're talking through this. But you're absolutely right. Spartan is pretty intense, probably compared to some of the others. I haven't done the others, but so this is all hearsay, I guess, based on what I've heard from other runners. But Spartan, I love Spartan's mission. I love how they're trying to help people get off the couch and get moving, do the things that they've never done before, kind of take control of their health and fitness. And I love all of those things. And, I would say that let me think about it. So the sprint. So the sprint I did in New York. So it was Bethel Woods.
Yep.
The super I did in Loudon, New Hampshire at the Indy 500
wow.
Speedway, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the beast was at Vernon, New Jersey,
Wow.
which was on the mountain. So
Yeah.
like you said, just the terrain can be treacherous for sure, but also, the penalties. So if you don't pass an obstacle, you're going to do a penalty. So historically, it was 30 burpees.
Yeah.
You don't pass an obstacle, 30 burpees. If you did a stadium race, they're like, all right, 15 burpees for a stadium race. Now it's 30 burpees or maybe a penalty loop. But still, the penalty loops, you're wading through water. So you might just want to just do the obstacle correctly or pass it the first time. But so, the philosophy around getting people off the couch, but they're not going to make it easy for you, right? They're going to say, well, you're going to sign up for this. You're going to do something that's intense, but you're going to be a better person when you come out on the other side of this. So it's been a fun experience. But it's been challenging, I would say.
That's so awesome. I mean, I do, I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said, in terms of, getting people off the couch, but, there's a different, I think they kind of, they have a little bit of some of the magic there. And I know before we hit record, we were talking about the marathon magic. And I think with the Spartan, the magic, being able not only to, run these events, but to physically do those obstacles, right? Or to do 30 burpees or whatever, whatever. And I remember going to my first Spartan race. I was like, I didn't know what the hell I was in for. And then, I left and I was like, oh my God, man, that was like really, really cool. And I can see where people get the addiction. And we kind of left that one going, man, how do I get better at this? Right? Like, how do you, and again, being a runner, as you said, like runners typically don't like, we're not doing push-ups and pull-ups and stuff like that. I remember my first Spartan, there was like one of those monkey bar things and, I couldn't, and I was like so defeated, but then, you go through it and you're like, all right, I did that. That's pretty cool. Right. But then you have that thing in the back and you're like, after you finish, you're like, oh man, like I want to get better at that. Right. Like how do I do that and work on that to next time, breeze through that and not have to do 30 burpees because you can't do the monkey bars. Right. Or the one that always ruined me is the spear throw. I don't know if they had that.
Mm-hmm.
Into the hay bale. And like that killed me all the time. Like I could never get that thing into the hay bale. And I know there's technique that's involved in everything, but it's just like they have that magic, right? That gets those people to come back year after year after year and to continue to do these events and to get better and to, get people off the couch to, like you said, face these fears, whether it's heights or getting shocked, right? I think there was at one point you would, have to go through like a course and they'd have like these little shocking things on them, to like run through or jump over fire or, do all these really cool obstacles.
Yeah, for sure. And, what you said about, kind of taking on those challenges and wanting to do better, that was me after my first race. So my first race was in Arlington, Virginia. Beautiful course, beautiful day. Couldn't have asked for a better day. And I'm feeling good for the first three obstacles. I get over these walls. I'm running. I'm feeling good. I get to about the fourth obstacle and I failed it. And as we just talked about, the penalty is 30 burpees. So I do my 30 burpees and literally lost my will to live. I'm like, this is crazy. I just did 30 burpees. I don't feel like I could run anymore. I'm pretty sure I'm going to fail a bunch more obstacles. So it was super, super challenging. But you know what? I finished it. And at the end of it, I was like, I could for sure do that better. But I need help. And that's when I got a coach. And that coach has been working with me for almost my entire, obstacle course racing career, we'll say, outside of that first race. And that's kind of what led me to today.
That's awesome. It's awesome stuff. So how did you start the podcast? Like what was the inspiration to get that started? Yeah.
So I'm telling my story just as I'm sharing with you and your listeners here today about doing these races and doing the workouts and, just feeling good about myself, just physically, just getting back in shape and being able to do these things. And I got a lot of positive feedback. Folks seem to be really interested in what I was doing, and I would get asked about my races, and I would share photos, which was very exciting. But on the other side of it, I would also hear, oh, I wish I could do that. I never could do something like that. Wow, good for you. That's not for me. I'm not a runner. I would hear all these things. And I'm like, you really don't know that I'm a runner. Yes. I'm not an obstacle course racer. And for sure, I'm doing things that I've never done before and never thought I could do. So it's one of those, if I could do it, you could do it. And I've had that in the back of my mind for a while. And I really wanted to help others, but didn't know how. So fast forward to when the pandemic happened, I started to run more outdoors. And I was like, you know what? I really wanted to help others in a way, maybe build a community. You know, we weren't seeing people in person at the time. And I was like, maybe I could build a community to share my story and just help others kind of keep moving during this pandemic. And a friend of mine had mentioned, well, why don't you start a podcast? I was like, I don't know. I don't know much about podcasting. I don't know much about podcasts. But then I really thought about it. And I was like, you know what? There are a lot of people with far more interesting stories than my own, I think. And a podcast, it basically enables me to share those stories. So it's just been a joy for me to just, kind of start that podcast, bring on guests who have these amazing, amazing running journeys, and then share those with others to say, yeah, at one point I didn't do it, or I didn't think I could do it, but I made that commitment or made a decision to take control of my health and fitness and start running. And it was really hard from the majority of my running journey, but look at where I am today, and being able to share that with others has been a joy. So that's really kind of what led me to start the podcast, was just the opportunity to share other people's stories other than my own, about their running journeys to help, inspire others to run.
That's so awesome. I mean, I mentioned before, we were talking before we hit record, and, I think running is something that anyone can do. Right. And I mentioned, the marathons. That's what I find so amazing. And I think if you go to any of these mass running events like Spartan, I mean, I remember going to Spartans. I haven't gone to one in a long time, but I think the last one I was at Mount Snow, it was one of their big events. Like, they had the multiple races, the half marathon, the beast. I forget the terminology.
Trifecta weekend.
Yeah. Trifecta weekend. Right. But there were people from all walks of life, in all shapes and sizes and all sorts of disabilities. And I think that's the one thing that's really inspiring in any running arena, right? Whether it's a marathon, a Spartan, sometimes you see that at 5Ks, right? Locally, that are big enough, or even some smaller ones that anyone can go out and do it, regardless of their disability, regardless of their sex, regardless of their race, and really do something positive. Just is so inspiring. So it's pretty wild, and I commend you for having that thought and that process, because as we said before, I think that the more that we share these stories of people that are, hey, you're able to do this, like, it's inspiring, it's positive, like, anyone can do this. And I truly believe that anyone can run a race, whether it's a Spartan or a half marathon, a marathon, a 5K for that matter, with the proper training, right? It's just got to get up. Right. We got to get that first step. So on that note, let's talk about this. Like, what do you think? I'll put you on the spot here. What do you think is like the most important piece of like getting off the couch to that 5K, or to whatever? It could be the Spartan, it could be a 5K, it could be a half marathon.
Yeah. This is something I've actually been fascinated with, and I've been studying through my interviews with all of my guests to understand that question, because that's something I want to know and understand. What motivated one person to do that 5K or start running versus someone else in probably a very similar situation with the very same reasons why they can't, quote unquote, can't do it. What drives someone to do it versus the other? And, I can't say that I've really figured it out yet. Like, what's that moment in time where they're like, I got to do this. But what I've learned so far, at least from the guests that I brought on the show, there's usually some point in their life that's a turning point for them, whether they realize it or not. It's usually been a diagnosis. It's been a life change, divorce. They've had, had children, or just some life change around there. It's been one day they just got up and looked in the mirror like, I don't want to live this way anymore, right? I want to make a change. So there's always been some turning point where I don't know if I would call it crisis, but something really dramatic just kind of happened in their life or went through their mind that made they made the decision to make a change. So that's something I've been really studying and trying to learn, what that is for different folks, because what I'd love to do is help inspire people before they get to that point, before they get to that, diagnosis, because there's a lot of things that, could be prevented. I'm not a doctor, but we know that there's certain lifestyle habits that kind of lead to certain conditions. And, that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is get ahead of that. But for a lot of the folks that have come on the show and that I know have spoken to, it's usually some turning point in their life where they want to make that decision. And that's okay too, because I want to be here to help them take the next step, because that's going to be the next barrier, right? If you figured out that you want to make a change, but you don't know how, well, what should I do? Or can I really do that? Maybe I need coaching. Maybe I need an accountability group. So, I want to be there to help them with that next step to get them to where they want to be.
So my next question then would be, for those people that don't know, what do you think? And I know you just mentioned some great ideas there. What would be the next step?
So, what I always talk about on the podcast is really knowing your why. Setting a goal and knowing your why. For sure, you have to have that in mind of where you want to go to. And then the next step is really around having, that plan. So if you've never, let's say it's running, right? If you've never run before and you're not sure if you could run, maybe just get out and walk. And just time on your feet, get out and walk, and just be comfortable with it. But to get to that point of running, you need a plan. So there's plenty of Couch to 5K programs and plenty of plans and coaches to kind of help you on that journey. But I always say kind of start with that goal and of what it is that you want to accomplish, and then really, truly write down why you want to do it and have that in front of you, because there are days that are going to get hard, especially early on, if you've never done this before, and just being able to see that goal and know why you're doing it is going to help you through that.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I think, my brother's an engineer, and I think I just saw your engineer come out a little bit with how, but in all seriousness though, that's so critical and so powerful, because it's going to be hard, but you got to take that first step, right? And you got to have a plan. Most people who succeed in life, regardless of what they do, whether it's running or business or family or, whatever they do, they have a plan, right? They know where they're going. They're not just aimlessly. And, I guess this is a little bit, I'll get on the soapbox here, anyone, I think, we're in kind of an interesting time, to say the least, with social media and how people, look at these social influencers, and I was just having this conversation with someone, and they were like, oh yeah, that person, what do? They make millions of dollars. Well, they're a social influencer. All they do is post to social media. And, there's this segment of the population now that thinks like, well, that's all you can do and you'll make money and, you open these, but I'm sure those people had a plan, right? They just didn't get there at the top. No one gets to the top. Maybe there's luck and, there's certain circumstances and things that may happen, but for the most part, 99.9% of the people have a plan. They stick to that plan, and that's how they become successful, regardless of the career path, regardless of the profession. You could be a doctor, an attorney, an accountant, an engineer, head of marketing. You got to have a plan, right? And most people who are successful have a plan. And so anything that you want to achieve in life, it's important to have that plan. And to your point, as you said, there's plenty of programs out there. And there's plenty of coaching out there. There's accountability groups. I think that one's awesome. Because I think, I just speak from experience. I've been running with the same Saturday morning run group for probably the last almost 15 years. And man, when I miss those Saturdays, if I'm not traveling, there hasn't been many that I've missed. Because if I'm traveling, that's one thing, if I'm out of town, but if I'm home and I'm not getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning to go run, something's up, to see my running group. So I think that's like really critical if you can find that. I want to shift here a little bit and talk about, your experience with pancreatic cancer. I know, you said you lost your mother-in-law to pancreatic cancer. So let's talk a little bit about that and that experience here.
Yeah, for sure. So my wife's mother, well, my wife, I mentioned, from Peru, so her family's from Peru, and her parents usually stayed with us. They spent some time in the U.S., sometimes with us, sometimes with my brother-in-law or my sister-in-law. And back in 2015, yeah, I think it was back at the fall around 2015, my mother-in-law wasn't feeling very well. And she was here, and they diagnosed her with diabetes at that time. And it was my in-laws that were in very great shape. They ate well. They were very active, for their age. I mean, they were incredible. I always tell the story that we took my father-in-law to Puerto Rico a few years ago, and we went to El Morro, which is the old fort in San Juan. Yeah. And we went all the way to the bottom of the fort, one level at a time. But then when it was time to go, we had to go all the way up. And he made up all those stairs. I'm the one gasping for breath, and he made up all those stairs. And it was just incredible how in good health and great shape both of them were. And so it felt really sudden, kind of in the fall of 2015, when she wasn't feeling well and she was diagnosed with diabetes. And it wasn't until I want to say about 3 or 4 months later, they went back to Peru. They felt like there was time for them to go back and spend some time there. And there they were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Oh. And that was a shock. And all of a sudden as well. And they're far away. So, our family's here and they're over there. So that was hard. So, I don't have a lot of the details of everything that went on, when they were over there, but I do remember thinking, I'm like, okay, well, it's cancer and we're going to fight this, right? My mother-in-law is going to fight this and she's going to get, a treatment plan. And I remember I was talking to somebody about it and they looked at me when I shared the story. They looked at me like, are you kidding? Like, this is very serious. And it wasn't until later on that I learned that, more times than not, pancreatic cancer is caught very late, late stage, and survival rates are relatively low at that point in time. And I didn't know. And I realized I knew nothing about it. And, I really felt like I wish I knew more about it before. And I wish there was, obviously I think everybody feels this way. You could have done more, earlier on. You wish you could have seen the signs and, you could have helped out. So it was really, really hard. It was hard. I think from the time she was diagnosed to the time she passed was very short. She passed over the summer of 2016. And so obviously that was hard for the family. They all went back to Peru to be with her kind of during those final moments and then for the services and everything. And then, so that's in a nutshell the story without going into a lot of great detail. But it wasn't until the fall of that year of 2016 where, we discovered PanCan, and we'd gone to a Purple Light event, and we'd heard other stories about survivors or those who had lost loved ones to pancreatic cancer. And that's really kind of what started it for me. I just really felt like this is something that people should know. There should be greater awareness about this cancer, about the signs, about, getting checked, about the resources to help people who have been, patients who have been diagnosed. And that's really kind of what started me down this journey of supporting. And, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I've been trying to use, my podcast and my community as one of those avenues to kind of help support and raise awareness for pancreatic cancer.
So yeah, let's talk about that, because I love to share that with our audience here. So, before we get there, I just want to say this one thing. I mean, I think, the one thing about this disease, this is like our biggest challenge, and this is like big picture. I think because of the statistics and because of the reality, like I think human nature, we try to avoid difficult subjects, difficult topics. And I think pancreatic cancer is one of them. Right. And so people tend not to kind of like dive into it. And I think that's one of the struggles I think the space as a whole has, not just us, but Pancan, I'm sure too, as well. If we, ask them, it's just hard. Like, how do we motivate the people outside of the space? Because the people inside the space get it, right? Like, we all understand it. We see it. Hindsight's always 2020, like, I wish I, knew more about it myself, when I was going through it with my dad, that I know now. But it's really, that's like the silver bullet in all this is like, how do we amplify the awareness outside of this pancreatic cancer community? Because we need to motivate and need to get people engaged, right? It's a numbers game to some degree. When you look at cancer statistics, breast cancer is a 250,000 person disease. Pancreatic cancer is like 64, 65 and change, right? So it's, almost 5 to 1. So that we have that one struggle because we're always fighting with other cancers in the sense of raising awareness. But then also, like, how do we amplify that messaging across the board so that the person that doesn't necessarily want to know or know about it knows about it, right? From the symptom standpoint or from a diagnostic standpoint or what the options are, where to go, really, right? Quite frankly, even when you get this information or when you are diagnosed. So let's talk about that, segue into like how you're advocating and creating awareness in your community.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on something that you said. Again, I wish that I even myself spent more time researching and learning more about those resources and just becoming aware of it, because for sure beforehand I didn't know. And, working in healthcare over the last 6 years, this is, an area that I'm really learning and exploring, and I'm really loving being in this field. So you think I would be on top of it, I would be all over this, and but I really wasn't, and it wasn't until it was too late. And I don't want that for other people. So, just to share a little bit about what I've done is, one of the types of guests that I bring on the show are race organizers, and the reason why I do it is mostly for charity type races. And the reason why I do it is to just kind of raise awareness of that organization kind of behind the race. So you may sign up for a race because, okay, you're a 5K runner and you got a race that's going to be in town and it fits your schedule and you just want to get out there and run. But, what are you really supporting? What's kind of behind it? Or maybe you don't know anything about the race. And what I found is running for causes is actually one of the ways that people get into running. Yeah. Which is really interesting. They may do it to support a family member or a friend, and they're not a runner, but they're raising money for the organization, and they're running that 5K or 10K or half marathon in support of their friend or family member, which I think is truly inspiring. So, I want to give more organizations that opportunity and awareness by sharing that with my community. So that's one of the ways, is to bring on guests on the show to share a little bit about what their organization is about and what they're doing to help patients within, kind of within that group. So that's one of the ways. Another way is running myself. So I, being a runner, so I love to run 5Ks and support. So that's something I've done, and just generally advocating on social media, just sharing my story. I've been featured in stories about kind of the story I just shared here. And again, all with the idea of just raising awareness and making people just really stop and think about, like, here are things you should look out for. Here are resources that are available to you. Here are areas that you could support, even if you're not impacted. Here are areas that you could support. So that's a little bit about how I've been trying to support and raise awareness. I mean, we're going on 6 years now since my mother-in-law has passed, and this is something that I'm still very passionate about.
Well, thank you for all that that you're doing, because how do I put this? And don't take offense to it. I think over time, sometimes people like lose that, right? Like, after the first year, everyone's excited, motivated, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I don't think I just love when people offer to raise awareness, and if they do it for a year, I love it. We embrace it. they do it for a second year. It's like awesome. But things happen in life, right? Like people have families and then their priorities shift a little bit, right? Like, and that's like the one thing with cancer, and this is with all cancer diagnoses, right? Not just pancreatic cancer, but first of all, we all pass away at some point. No one lives forever. At least we haven't found that holy grail or whatever. But life does come at you fast, and things change, and jobs, kids, whatever it may be. So thank you for continuing to advocate and continue to remember your mother-in-law and continue to help raise awareness, because as I said before, the more people, the more that this whole thing is churning, and the bigger that pot becomes, we're gonna find cures. We're gonna raise a lot of awareness. We're gonna find more funding. People are gonna be getting diagnosed at earlier stages and have better outcomes. But we've all got to kind of play that part, right? And the more that we have, people in that circle and in that pot, churning and making noise and raising awareness, that's what we need. We need it to be exponential, in terms of the awareness. And that's probably the biggest key to this is how much noise can we make with everyone? And that is critical. So thank you for continuing to do that and doing, all the awareness that you're doing with the podcast and running. It's just awesome. And as I think we said, I know we said this off the air, but I think we mentioned it before too on the air. It's just awesome to see people turn like a negative, as and your family know, into such a positive, for other people and to give back. And the positives that you've created through the podcast and through your own experience of running and bringing people on to share about that, to get people moving, which is awesome.
Appreciate it.
All right. I got a couple questions here, and then we've got one last thing, and we're going to share where our audience can connect with you. A little bit of rapid fire here. If you could interview any guest on your podcast, who and why?
Wow. Anybody. There's so many. This is super hard. So,
we'll do a top three then. I'll give you three. Yeah. I'll give you three.
I'll give you one. One that comes to mind. I actually had a similar question about a year ago, and this person was top of mind for me. So it's an actor. It's actually Denzel Washington, and the reason why is because I love his personality. I love his persona. I love what he brings to the movies, and I feel like how he is in the movies is how he is in real life. He comes at life with a lot of passion. Very intellectual, just somebody that I would want. If I were to interview anybody, I think he would be in the top three for sure. But yeah, that's who comes to mind.
Awesome. I love it. And I love Denzel. He makes great movies, and off the air, he's awesome. Next question, 5-year goal. Where do you see your running career in 5 years? What accomplishments may you have? And then secondarily, where do you see the podcast?
Yeah, sure. So for my running career, I'm still facing my fears. I'm still thinking about what are the things that I haven't done that I should consider doing, because I haven't made those decisions yet. But if I'm looking 5 years out, for sure, I think my next big step is a marathon. That is one thing that I'd love to do, even if it's only once. And if it happens to be the New York City Marathon, that'd be cool too. But that's really one of my long-term goals, is to do that again. Being a cross-country runner, I only ran 5Ks, not this distance, not this half marathon distance. And I feel like that's the next step. After that, my Spartan coach is always encouraging me to do more with Spartan. So the Spartan Ultra is the next step up from the Beast, which, if the Beast wasn't terrifying enough, they have an Ultra, and that could be in my future as well. So it's basically like running 2 Beast races all at once. And it's just a tremendous experience. And I've seen the people who have done it, and they're just really tremendous people. So that's number 2. And then number 3, just getting better at my running and getting faster and enjoying it along the way. And I've learned a lot about myself, at least over the last couple of years, about what I enjoy and what I don't enjoy. and I'm thinking I'm going to stay away from the things that I don't enjoy because I don't want this to become a chore. And I really want to continue to love what I'm doing and find those things that kind of, again, bring me joy. So those are probably the three things that I'm looking 5 years out, is that marathon, ultra marathon kind of distance, and then just along the way, just becoming, better my performance and loving it along the way.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. That last point, loving the things you do. And that is something I think that takes a lot of courage sometimes, right? Because you got to say no sometimes too. And no one likes to say no, but I think that's so powerful, and learning how to say no and doing the things you love, which really make you happy. But in particular, like when it comes to running, like I hated running. And then my dad got diagnosed, and running became so special to me. And that's why I wanted to give it back to so many people. But like I went for a run this morning, and I was away all last week, and I didn't run. I actually walked like one day, and I just didn't have the opportunity, just weather wise. And I didn't have any indoor facility to run. And I was like, all right, it was cold this morning here in Connecticut. It was like 22, 25 in the morning. And I don't really, as I've gotten older, Richard, I don't know how you feel, but like running in the winter doesn't become any easier, I think, as you get older, right? As we were saying, like the summer was so hot, but I'd rather take a, 60, 70 degree humid morning versus, and I love to run in the morning. That's my jam. I don't like running after work or during the day. If I have to, I'll do it, but I like doing it early in the morning. And this morning I was like, all right, man, I just got to plan like the proper clothing. And I warmed up on the Peloton because we got a Peloton during COVID. And I was like nice and loose. That's the other thing as you get older, right? You got to stretch a little bit longer. Make sure we do those core exercises. And but I got my 2 miles in. That was my goal. But it was just so awesome, right? Like it was just something that I love doing, man. It's just awesome. So I love hearing that, because that I think is like so critical. My last question here, and this is a loaded question, and then we're going to share where our audience can connect with you and follow your podcast and learn more about it. This relates back to, your personal experience with your mother-in-law. It's a loaded question. There's no right or wrong, but given your experience, how do you define pancreatic cancer? What's your definition of it?
Wow, I have a lot to say about pancreatic cancer. Wow, that is a loaded question. With my experience with my mother-in-law, pancreatic cancer just felt like a no-win situation. That's probably how I would have described it. But since learning more about it and since being more involved in, organizations like yourself and yours and others, that's not the case, and that doesn't have to be the case. And, that's largely what I want to be able to do, is to just kind of change that for others, right? So it's not a no-win situation where, unfortunately it becomes that, especially if it's diagnosed late. So that would be my definition. And that's kind of my aspiration for the future.
Powerful stuff. Thank you for that answer. And thank you for all you're doing in the pancreatic cancer community. Like I said before, like we need more, the more that we amplify, the more people that get involved, the more people that stay involved. It's just so critical to the success. And to your point, that's where we move this thing and provide hope for a lot of people, battling, and that will be battling. My last thing here for our audience listening at home and watching here on YouTube, where's the best place for them to learn more about your podcast, follow your running journeys, and hear some great guests that you have on your podcast?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. So the name of the podcast is Inspire to Run Podcast. And you'd asked me earlier, what do I see the podcast in 5 years? Is what I'd love to hear is more and more folks from our community come to me and say, you helped me change my life. You inspired me to get off the couch and take that first step. And what we'd love to do is kind of guide them and direct them to the people that can help them, whether it's running coaches, whether it's nutritionists, whether it's that Couch to 5K plan or accountability group, whatever that case is, we want to help inspire them to take the first step and then guide them through the process. So in 5 years, just more and more of those stories of how Inspired to Run podcast really helped them kind of take that first step. That's really what I'm looking for, regardless of the size of the community or the listenership or whatever the case is. I really just want to make sure that we're making an impact person by person on an individual basis. But yeah, so Inspired to Run podcast, the podcast is available on all major platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us our website, inspiredtorun.co, and you can find us on Instagram at Inspired to Run podcast.
Awesome. Richard, thank you for all you're doing for the pancreatic cancer community and for the running community as a whole. It's been great to have you here, and I look forward to following your journey on your podcast. I'm going to subscribe to it and also following you on Instagram. Thanks for it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like what you hear today, feel free to share this episode, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also follow us on our YouTube channel here on YouTube as well, as we put our podcasts up on YouTube. Thank you for listening, and please be safe. Until next time, that's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast.